So welcome everyone to another New Intellectuals Network webinar special, this time with Santiago Oria. I'm Isidora Kolar and I'm the CEO of the New Intellectuals Network. And for those of you who don't already know, New Intellectuals Network, or NIN, is a US-based nonprofit focused on empowering emerging leaders in establishing new pro-liberty organizations by offering comprehensive training programs and diverse skill building opportunities. So our guest today is Santiago Oria, who is creative and publicist of Argentina's President Javier Milei. Santiago is a lawyer and a film director, and he's currently working as a part of President Milei's team. He is also the author of all the campaign and social media videos, as well as other audiovisual productions that popularized Milei's ideas and boosted his presidential campaign. So just to mention, you'll have an opportunity to ask Santiago questions at the end of the webinar. If you have any, either send them in the chat box or raise your hand after I finish my conversation with Santiago. So Santiago, thank you for joining us today.
So hi, Isidora, and I'm very pleased to be invited to this seminar. So as you had said, I've been working with Javier Milei since the minute zero of his political career. I've been with him since 2020 and followed him from zero to president. So
that's awesome.
So
you've been here from the start, yeah.
It's been an amazing journey and a record-breaking journey for an outsider in Argentine politics. Like, to come into politics and in only 3 years become president, it's been really record-breaking. Of course, not all the merit is to myself. The big merit is to Milei, and also I am part of a team. So, but I've been there since the beginning, and I have helped to build the image and how Milei looks and how Milei sounds and how Milei is displayed on screen. So from TV ads to social media ads, and I also made a feature-length documentary film that was a kickstart to our campaign in 2023, last year.
So can you tell me a little bit about how you came to join Milei's team? How did that happen?
Of course. So here the key historic catalyst is a pandemic. It's the quarantine. In Argentina, the quarantine was brutal. It was one of the harshest quarantines in the world and one of the longest ones in the world. People were kept inside their homes for very long and with very, very strict measures and control. So that sparked it mobilized myself to resist these big restrictions to freedom. I don't know how it was in the US or other places in the world, but in Argentina, it was really, really very strict. Like, not maybe Chinese levels, but it was really harsh. But like a resistance and a civil disobedient movement began to build up. And I started to join that movement. And we were very, I don't want to say we were like brave, but we were willing to go to prison if fighting these confinement measures. We didn't deny the pandemic, we didn't deny the virus, but we said confinement is not the solution. So now, right now, I'm talking to Zoom, like to many people right now, and it recalls me that time where we started to people who appreciated freedom, who wanted to have a more liberty-oriented country, a more free market country, a country that respected individual rights, started to get together by Zooms first, because if you went onto the streets, you could get imprisoned. So we started to get together like in these underground meetings of Zooms, and then the movement went from underground to above ground, and we we managed to get in the streets many people at a time, so it was much more difficult to like detain us, but it was a really harsh time and really like revolutionary time, and we were really willing to support anything. So two lessons that we can take from here, like libertarians should focus on movement building, like first, before any election, and that is about movement building has a lot to do with networking. We should be networking all the time, getting to know each other, getting to make collaborations with each other, and also from movement building, some like leaders and influencers start to emerge as the most influential ones, the most articulate ones, the most charismatic ones. And this is what happened with Milei. So Milei was already a media personality, but he wasn't 1/10 of what he is today. Like, he was famous, but not world famous, and people didn't take him too seriously as a political leader. So how did I join the Milei team? On 2020, Milei published a book. The book was called Pandenomics, like economics related to the pandemic. And I proposed him to make a documentary to sell the book better. So we made a 30-minute documentary based on the book. The documentary was an interview to Milei, like explaining his views about the pandemic, about the economic consequences of the quarantine and of confinement. And I tried to just make it as entertaining as possible. And also the shooting was all in violation of the restriction of the confinement measures. So we were engaged in civil disobedience. But we were so committed, and they knew we were willing to go to prison if they detain us, that they were like kind of scared of us. Like they couldn't control us. So we made the documentary, we published it we made an avant premiere in a hotel because all cinemas were closed due to confinement. And then we made a very successful social media distribution of the documentary. Milei was very happy with my work. So as soon as he said he would get into politics and began building a campaign for Congress, he called me to join his team. And there is something that happens, it happens in Argentina, but I'm quite sure it also happens in the US, maybe to a lesser degree. But most filmmakers, most people who are in the arts or who create artistic work, they are on the left. So I think I am one of the few, but happily this is changing and this is growing. But I was like the only libertarian, like film school trained filmmaker. Like, I had a formal education in film. I had been working as a professional in the industry, so I had a high skill. And I also had what Milei really appreciated about me is that I was also not only I was good at from the technical standpoint of filmmaking, I was very educated in the ideas. So I could understand the ideas and I could understand the epic that he wanted to create. So that's very important. It's not only about being a good technician of filmmaking. You have to understand the message, you have to know it deeply, and you have to really be passionate about it. So that's also very important. So that's how I joined the Milei team. And as my productions were of a very good quality, even though we worked with very few resources and very few money, I managed to enter his circle, his most inner circle of collaborators. And that's the way I began designing his campaign, his ad campaign. And that's the way basically I got in. I was introduced by a mutual friend that that so that's what I talk about networking. You have to meet each other, you have to know each other, you have to start creating these networks of people that they will be the base for when you really got to get into to dispute power. So okay, I could talk for hours, but let's carry on.
Yeah,
Maybe to
and so
another question or
yeah,
yes.
can you tell us a little bit more about your role during the campaign? I mean, you said you were the ones making films and making videos. Can you give us a little bit more details about that? What the process was like, what the creative process especially was like?
All right. So as you said in my introduction, I'm a lawyer, but I don't use that toolbox anymore. I am a filmmaker, but I'm a big autodidact. I study a lot of strategy. You have to know strategy. You have to read Sun Tzu, The Art of War. You have to read Clausewitz on War. You have to another author, American author, that is quite useful. Not everything he writes is I agree with, but Robert Greene is also like 48 Laws of Power, strategy. You have to read every book of strategy you can get your hands on. You should know a lot about strategy. You should know a lot about history of your own country. You have to understand what's going on your country, what's the zeitgeist of the moment. You have to this is not only about making a funny video for YouTube or for Instagram. You have to really touch a fiber of the voting public. So as you can see behind me is part of my personal library. You should really get to understand your society. You have to get to understand your national reality. That's like the first step. So when we began making what would be Milei candidate, we had to study like the history of the ideas of liberty in Argentine history. And what used to happen is that maybe this happens in the US too, but libertarian ideas or classic liberal ideas were not really popular. Like they were part of small elite circles of upper middle class or high class people, like the worker, the common man. And in Argentina, sadly, we are a very impoverished country. So many people live sometimes for $2 a day or something like that. So people are like really in a bad economic situation, and ideas of liberty never were we would never had been able to well. And in Argentina, poverty is like about 50 to 60%. So that's where the majority of the votes are too. So you have to get to that people. So we really wanted to make a popular candidate. He had to be one of the people. He had to speak to people who don't understand economics. So before we even start the campaign, we engaged in a 5-month like investigation and planning and how would Milei look like? How would our campaign would be? How we could capitalize on our strengths? How to be aware of all our weaknesses that were mainly lack of money and lack of structure, political structure. Like in Argentina, we call political structure like the big parties have like people everywhere, all over the country, where they have we call them unidad básica. They have like a local, no? They have like places where people can meet, and they have like a lot of reach because they have organized all around the country. We didn't have any kind of territorial reach, and that's really expensive. But also that was getting kind of old. So what we said is we have to make a digital reach. We have to get to everybody's cell phones. So I mean, it's been there are lots of facets about how to make a campaign, but you really have to. Sun Tzu says that you have to know thyself and know your enemy, and you will never lose a battle. So you have to understand also what the other people are doing. So, for example, in Argentina, what used to be the most normal way of doing a political ad was with actors, no, with people who are like pretending to support a politician or were pretending to work. Like everything was like really fake. So what did we do? We said, no, we're going to go with a documentary approach. Not only it is way cheaper because we don't have to hire actors, we don't have to make a lighting of a scene that looks like a fiction movie. So that was way cheaper and much more real and believable and authentic. And so that maybe it doesn't sound too revolutionary, but here in Argentina, it was really surprising when we started doing like a more kind of documentary style ads where we really went to the normal people and we just made them able to speak their voice. Like I have to pay so much taxes, the inflation is killing me. Like people were, without them knowing they had never read Ayn Rand or Rothbard or all the literature, but they were like experiencing firsthand like the weight of the state on them. So what else can I say? But we also investigated the Milei's past. He's a son of a bus driver, so like kind of very humble origins. This bus driver was very, very hardworking. Then he could manage to buy his own bus and then a second bus, a third bus. So we could show people that Milei was not an elitist. He was not part of the higher class, or that he was really one of the people. And so this was very important because in Argentina, this is highly appreciated by the voter. They want to vote someone who looks like them, who talks like them, and that's why people say, but Milei, he uses so much foul language. But that's the way it is. That's a way to get empathy from that kind of voter. So, and all these ideas of making popular, were really controversial inside the libertarian movement and inside the classic liberal movement. So what you will experience as soon as your movement starts growing is infighting and debates and what is the best strategy and who is the best candidate. Milei shouldn't do this. If Milei continues doing this, I will draw myself away from the movement. So you will experience a lot of infighting. So you must like really steel up, and you have to build up your psychological strength in order to deal with this, because it's one of the hardest parts of doing politics and organizing a movement. It's all the infighting that goes on, all the criticism that goes on, all the ego fights that go on, because in Argentina there were many like emerging pro-liberty authors and intellectuals and speakers and influencers, but many of them wanted to be number one. So when Milei started rising, many tried to pull him down. So it was by supporting Milei and defending him as the most charismatic candidate, the most prepared candidate, that we managed to win all the internal struggles in the movement and really consolidate him as the leader of the movement and the one who should be the candidate for all. And everyone with these ideas should support him, no? So I am talking about many subjects all intertwined because it has been a really fast and furious years where everything happened simultaneously. We had to make a campaign while fighting the inside problems of our movement, while trying. So something that's very important: you have to be original. You can't copy everyone else. You have to really show yourself as someone totally different. So not only Milei has a very particular way of speaking. Our political acts were modeled after rock concerts. So if you see a video about Milei's political rallies, they look like a rock concert. We play rock. We display lions of fire on the screens. We make it. It's really important to entertain people, so that people come to your rally, have a good time, and they also listen to the ideas we're proposing. And another thing that Milei did that is quite unique is that whenever he had a political rally, I'm talking rallies about going around in the end parts of the campaign, like 100,000 people, 80,000 people, and he went all through the middle of the people, walking through the middle of the people. And so that was really a security issue that drives us nuts, but that was a way of building this kind of epic. And okay, so my job was to basically tell the story of this campaign, tell the story of our country, and the tools I use, the narrative tools I use, I really relied a lot on the hero's journey. I'm sure you Americans are acquainted with that. Like, the hero's journey is like the base of almost most popular Hollywood films. So you know about Joseph Campbell and all that. So I tried to make a campaign that was documentary looking, but had a more kind of epic narrative, where Milei was a hero. He had his allies, he had his enemies, he had his mentors, and we tried to build up this epic story, and we encourage people to be a part of it, to join. So here in Argentina, most political parties, like, they hire professional campaign managers, and these managers create banners and stickers, and everything is like official looking and very tidy. What we said to the people, you can make your own campaign, just make your own stuff. Don't worry about getting any official approval. You can make you can paint a lion on your car. Go ahead, like, do anything you want to support Milei. So that also was very cheap, because people were using their own money to make their own campaign. It was fun. Like, some people jumped from airplanes and with a Milei flag and with parachutes. Like, people do crazy stuff. But that also wasn't everywhere in the news, so we called the attention of the news. So we were like really making like a guerrilla style campaign, where people were like part of a rebellion. They were, and we really tried to encourage that as much as possible. And people really joined, and people had fun, and also started to see, like, and also that made the campaign very legitimate, because it was like a kind of William Wallace situation, where like the rag and tack rebels were fighting against the organized armies of the political establishment. And that kind of epic, that kind of story, that kind of David versus Goliath story really caught on. And we had lots of people like join the movement and start campaigning by themselves. This was a double-edged sword, because we had lots of energy like released, and people made lots of banners, homemade banners, and I can show you pictures later if you want, about how very poor people made on cardboards. They wrote Milei 2023, like something very humble, but also it had its own charm and its own like it was really very it was really like a very emotional. I'm not finding the right word right now, but to see someone like so humble, like draw his own banner by his own hand, and making a statement in that way that he wanted to get free from his oppressors by all the political people who try to enslave them with handouts, and so like people like broke their own chains, and we were showing that that, and that really made the movement explode, no? And I don't know, yes.
Yeah, I want to ask you about how big of a factor was the whole economic situation? I assume that was the major or the most important factor to Milei's success. But I also want to ask you, do you think if the economic situation wasn't that grave and that bad, do you think that Milei still would have succeeded?
Well, it's always impossible to make alternative history. History is what it is, and you can't really, it's very hard to predict a kind of alternative. But of course, yes, the economic crisis was very important. And because people could see and could feel in their own pockets that our statements about a state-managed economy were true. Maybe when you live in the US, you take like many things for granted and you don't really realize how much more free you are from other parts of the world. So maybe you don't get a sense of what it is to be in a state-run economy. So as it's very hard to us to even imagine, for example, to live in Soviet Russia. It's very hard to get a sense of what that really is, how oppressive it is, how you have a police state, how you have a totally state-run economy. So yes, people who could see the failure of a state-run economy, a failure that's been going on from over 80 years, more or less, or maybe even 100 years in Argentina. Argentina that used to be a very well-off country, a very rich country, and really declined. You can see that in many, many, many studies. I don't remember who was the economist who said this, but he said that all economic theories fail in two countries, in Japan because of its success and Argentina because of its failure. So people could see that our statements were true because they were really feeling it firsthand. So that was really important. To the success of Milei was really important. And also it was important that both major parties had failed to fix the economic crisis, or people were looking for an alternative. Like both big parties had totally failed and had deepened the crisis. So they were looking for an alternative. And also something that happens in Argentina, I don't know to what extent in the US, but I'm sure it happens too, and in many other places of the world, that politicians in Argentina are really like a kind of privileged class in society. They have lots of perks, lots of access to shady business. In the pandemic, this was really, it was brutally palpable. For example, when the vaccines came in, politicians got their vaccine first before the normal people. And some justified saying that no, because we run the country. If we die, we can't run the country. So people were seeing firsthand that they were like first-class citizens and second-class citizens. You remember in Animal Farm, no? That phrase, we are all equal, but some people are more equal than others. So people could see that firsthand. And also something that happened that was like a big, big, big scandal that totally ruined the Alberto Fernandez presidency, the previous president, is that we were all in confinement, and some videos about a birthday party of his wife with lots of people and champagne like filtered to the media. And so he was demanding all of us to stay in our homes, and he was having a birthday party with lots of people and champagne in Olivos, and that was a big, big scandal. So people could see what we talked about, the political case, no? That is something that in Rothbard's book, The Anatomy of the State, this is like kind of well explained, that society is divided mainly in two, in net taxpayers and net tax takers or tax consumers. And so people could really see that society in Argentina had been divided like sharply in two. People who lived from public, from taxes, and who had the lives of aristocracy and the normal people who worked to maintain this state-run economy and all these state workers and this bureaucracy, and that there was really a lot of difference between them and all the privileges these bureaucracy people had. And so yes, so the economic crisis and the inequality between bureaucrats and politicians was really seen in a very brutal and black and white way in these years. So that was a very important factor, of course.
And okay, go ahead.
Yes. No, just to make a small quotation about strategy, that even though maybe in the US you live better and all that, but something that I see libertarians do not address in many parts of the world, like they don't, their issues are not the issues of the common people. So maybe they're speaking about if pot should be legalized, or maybe there's or maybe very marginal issues about where if roads should be public or private, or things that are very theoretical and not in the immediate needs of the people. Libertarians should speak about the immediate needs of the people, their how their wallet is shrinked by the state, how they get less opportunities. Like talk about their very essential needs and how really a more statist kind of organization of a country really hinders you, and you should talk about what really is in the mind of normal working class people. So that's my opinion that you should pay attention to.
And Milei is obviously a very charismatic leader.
Yes.
And I think that's something that he is kind of most famous for. Not everyone is into his type of charisma, but he is without a doubt very charismatic. So how much did your campaign rely on his personality and on that charisma? And was that also one of the keys for his success?
Well, I do think so, that yes, he's charismatic, he's a very good orator, but he's not only charismatic, he's really solid on philosophy and on arguing and defending the ideas of liberty. So he has both. He's very, very solid in debating and argumentation, but he's obviously very charismatic too. Like people like to watch him, he's entertaining. So yes, we relied when we found that we had no money, no structure, but we had this charismatic personality. We say we have to bet everything on the personality, more or less. So yes, that was a very important factor. But as you go movement building, these kind of leaders should appear and should emerge, and you should identify and fight them and support them. We libertarians, or people who are more maybe on the right side of the spectrum, we know that people are not equal. Not everybody is as pretty, not everybody is as intelligent, not everybody is as charismatic. So when you find someone who is charismatic, who makes a good candidate, who is very solid in the ideas of liberty, you should try to support him, and you can play a more support role as myself. Like I play a very big role in I am basically like I sometimes call myself, I am the bard of Milei. I talk about his epic tales and his epic. I am the storyteller of his party, and not only because I make all these ads and all these movies, but because I am engaged in social media, and I write a lot, and I sometimes give interviews, and so my strength is more in storytelling. I am not really maybe very charismatic. So people have to know what is their best contribution, and try to leave egos aside. And if you find a charismatic leader, you should try to prop him up. And so yes. So we did rely on his charisma, but we exploited it with all our tools to the max. But what this means is that you shouldn't do really the same thing that we did, but you should, something about strategy is very important. You have to adapt to your reality. You have to know your reality, you have to know what you have, and you have to build from there. So, for example, we took ideas from many campaigns. We took ideas from Obama's campaign, from Trump's campaign, from Biden's campaign, from campaigns in Spain about there is a kind of left-wing party called Podemos. We took ideas from them. But for example, we said, okay, we have a kind, he's very different from Trump, but what he's maybe comparable is his histrionism, like his more bombastic style, and that has very good ratings on TV, and he's very but they say, okay, but we have a poor Trump because he has no money. How do we adapt being like a poor Trump? If Trump were poor, how would his strategy be? So he cannot fly around the country in a private plane. He cannot he doesn't have his own money to finance his campaign. How do we get the finance? How does Milei travel around the country? And so we made our lack of resources, we turned it into an advantage by saying we are the most legitimate party because we are a party that is auto-financed by the people, that we don't have money from maybe shady origins. So that gave us like a legitimacy, and also people appreciated that in the middle of an economic crisis, we weren't like wastefully spending on banners and on ads, and people appreciated that, and they valued our stuff more because, for example, we made many ads that were very simple and very cheap in production. And when I kind of someone from the opposing party, they filtered me a focus group, like they sent me a focus group they had done, and people were like giving their feedback on the ads, and they said, I am infuriated that they're spending so much money in this big political ad that is all lies about how well the country is doing. And I really appreciate that Milei did an app that is austere, that is cheap, because that I find it more respectful to me, that I'm having a hard time. And politicians are spending millions on their campaigns, and we are suffering. We don't have enough to get to ends meet. And so we turned our lack of resources into an advantage, and people could see that, and that was also a positive on us. Sorry if I jumped subjects all around. Okay.
Not at
You
all.
want to ask anything else?
No, I have many questions, but
Yes.
everything that you've covered so far is super important, so I don't want to interrupt you too much. So
Okay.
I'm also interested in you mentioned some of the stuff the libertarians are doing wrong. For example, all the infighting.
Yes.
I think we're really famous for that, unfortunately. We cannot seem to agree on a lot. And then also, you said that libertarians focus a lot on things that aren't that important to an average voter. But what do you think libertarians do wrong in terms of messaging, in terms of how they're speaking to the voter, and not just the voter, but to the average citizen?
Okay, so something it is very important, and I supervised as much as I could. It was very important to avoid cringe at all cost. Like I find that many libertarian kind of productions or videos or ads I find in social media are a bit cringy. So you should try to avoid that at all costs. So that's very important. There was a candidate here in Argentina that was called Horacio Rodríguez Larreta, and he was one of the favorites to become president, and he really wanted to get the young vote, and his stuff to get the young vote was so cringy and so fake, it really destroyed him. So there is a Simpsons episode where Mr. Burns is like dressed like a skater and saying, "Hey guys, like I am one of you," and it is so cringy. And so you have to avoid cringe at all costs. You have to get this one is one of the hardest parts because you have to get rid a bit of the weird element that many libertarians have, but this is something very difficult because, for example, when Milei started raising his chainsaw, I was worried, saying, "No, this is too violent. This will like." But then in the end, it worked. It worked really well, and people were taking chainsaws to the rallies. Oh my God! So, so this is like a very thin line you have to write. But I also think that what I feel is that many times libertarians like they focus on the wrong issues, issues that are not in the main agenda, issues that don't really matter to the average voter. So you should try to get on their interests first. Then you can, and also to avoid infighting, you have to get rid a bit of the what we call in Argentina, we call the libertyometer. Like everybody's, I am more libertarian than you. You're not a real libertarian. So you have to a bit relax those kinds of being like analyzing everyone and checking if he's as pro liberty as you. You have to. It's more important to get the ball rolling and into action than in discussing like theory. So when Milei started his party, and there were people who were more on the conservative side, people who were more on the patriotic side, people who are not like libertarians, pure libertarians. But we managed to build a coalition that is now in government, and we are going on the side of freedom. We're going towards freedom. So you have to be able to work with people who don't think exactly as you think, as long as you're pushing the rope on to the right side, no?
Yeah.
So that's important. And also many of the infighting gets solved when someone clearly wins the like it's not exactly the primaries because we don't have primaries in Argentina, but when somebody consolidates as the leader, like people say, okay, he won the political infighting and we should support this guy over the others. So sometimes that's the only way to fix it. It's not the best way,
Yeah.
but it's like we won, we call the shots, we are the best to, because something that is also very important, I think that libertarians, I'm talking about Argentina, but I'm sure this happens in many places of the world. They are not very good at organizing themselves. Like everybody's an individual. So when you build up an organization, organizations have hierarchies, have roles. You have to be able to work as a team in a better way. And I think maybe libertarians are more like herding cats. That's the common phrase. So you have to learn how to work as a team, how to organize along hierarchies, and that's the only way to make a powerful enough organization to carry out your ideas.
So you've mentioned how you had to rely a lot on online presence because you didn't have
Yes.
you didn't have like the local chapters or whatever that's called.
Yes.
And so you had to rely heavily on social media. So
Yes.
my question here is, how important is social media versus then traditional media, and did you have at all presence in the traditional media?
So in Argentina, like media outlets are very associated with one party or the other. Um, so we didn't have our own traditional media. We didn't have that. but Milei was so good at ratings that he got invited to to different channels and news outlets. So we didn't have really a place like to speak out our ideas. So the only place we had was social media. And that's why we got so good at it, because we were like, we really got good at it because it was like our only place where we could get reach and influence. So we really got really well. And nowadays we are the strongest in Argentina. We can set a trending topic, a number one trending topic on the country in 15 minutes. Like, we're very well organized there. We have some main figures or influencers that say, okay, I want to make the hashtag, I don't know, politicians are all crooks. Let's make it a trending topic. And in 15 minutes, that was trending topic. And then the traditional media would pick that up and speak about it. And so we didn't have access to traditional media. We only had social media and influencers on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. But we were the strongest ones, the ones with the most views, the most likes. So yes, it's very important. So yeah, yes. And what also helped us was making good content, like the one I make too. People we really got the attention of people. And so yes, that was key. That was key. And people said like Milei had no organization and no political structure, but we really had like an invisible political structure that was working on the web, and maybe traditional politics and traditional media couldn't see it, but it really surprised everyone when we got those results. So yes, and yes, that's a key factor. It's a key factor, and I think that if you don't have access to a traditional media, you should focus on that.
So I have just a couple of more questions, and I mean I have
Sure.
I have a lot more, but I'm gonna ask you just a couple more questions, and then we're gonna move on to the questions from the audience. So I'd like to know, do you think it's possible to replicate Milei's success in other countries with other libertarian candidates, or is he an outlier and is he just a phenomenon that's not gonna happen anytime soon?
No, I think you can, but you have to, as always, adapt to your own circumstances and your own realities. I think you can take a lot of lessons from what we did, but you have to adapt to your own realities. But I do think many things can be learned. For example, authenticity is the biggest driver of views and influence in the internet. You have to be real, you have to be credible, you cannot fake it. So that's very important, and that's universal. So being authentic, being yourself, even if that means doing some crazy stuff, as long as it isn't cringy, that's awesome. So also I think that the kind of grassroots and political organization in social media, in Twitter and Facebook, that can be replicated. We took it a lot from the Trump movement, that they used to be very strong on media. So that worked in the US, and we made our own version of that. That was like the third world version of that, with much more. I would love to show you some images if I can. But yes, lots of things can be replicated. Lots of things. Because we took ideas from abroad too. So no, I think it's a phenomenon that, of course, has to do a lot with the Argentine reality of being a state-run economy for so many decades, and the country totally failed at that. And then someone emerged like a freedom fighter, very articulate, very charismatic, and he was the right man for the right moment. So yes, of course, that's very important. But you can, well, Milei didn't appear in a vacuum. There was like a liberty movement that could not be, it would not, it was growing slowly, but it was there. And when Milei appeared, like many of the work had been done already. So maybe I won't say that you will get a libertarian president in the next election cycle, but you have to start building the movement. So yes, I think you can take lots of lessons and you should start. I think that something that's very important is that you have to identify the enemy very well. This is something very important. It's not the most comfortable kind of topic, but you have to find the enemy. You have to attack the enemy. In our case, it was politicians, and in the US, maybe politicians are not as crooked as in Argentina, so maybe it could be harder. But in Argentina, like most politicians are crooks, they are corrupt. So we had to identify the enemy, and we were very hard on them. Like we were really aggressive, but our aggression was justified because they were treading on us. Don't tread on me, you tread on me. I will fight back in a very aggressive way. So we were very aggressive, but really aggressive. We made videos showing their corrupt deals here and there, how they were hypocrites, how they were living with a standard of life that did not match his salaries as a public servant. So we were really hard, and people were really angry at politicians, and they liked that we were fighting for them. So identifying the enemy and being very aggressive on them is important. You have seen Milei like shouting against politicians and people. So yes, we really, I mean, this is like tapping on a bit of a darker side of human nature, but we really tapped on the anger, the genuine anger and legitimate anger people had, and we were representatives of that. So that's also important. And something that, what else can I say that could be replicable? I think that, well, I take all my storytelling from the hero myth, Joseph Campbell, all that. So that's a big component, and that's something that was created in the US by Joseph Campbell and Star Wars and all the Hollywood films. So if you can show that your movement is heroic and it's about rebels against a centralized power and all that kind of storytelling that get people really excited, and so that's something you can also use. So yes, there are lots of things you could take inspiration from us, because we took inspiration from the US, from Spain, from Brazil, from many countries around the world. We took what we found our best for our reality. So adapting to reality is crucial. That's very important. So read more about strategy, read more about that's very important. And also something that worked really well for us, we were unapologetic because libertarianism is a bit extreme, like smash the state, taxes are stealing. So we were really unapologetic. We really had like that kind of extreme way of saying things. But what I believe is that when you go for a more extreme position, you're going for the 100%. Maybe you will get the 50%, but at least you get the 50% of you were trying to accomplish. So it's not bad to be a bit extremist if you do it well. I mean, it's a very thin line from where you're going to walk. But in the case of Milei said, "I am an anarcho-capitalist," and that's crazy to say that in a political campaign, but it really worked, because people were like totally fed up of the state, of politicians. They wanted to really like smash them, and Milei was their hammer against the politicians. So it's not bad to state things in a very sharp contrasts. Like taxes are robbery, the state is everything is awful. It's Milei says the state, even as president, he says the state is a criminal organization because he's president, but from his position, he's trying to tear down the state as much as he can with his chainsaw. So he keeps pressing on, even though now he has an official position, he still defines the state in these very Rothbardian terms, no? It is a criminal organization. Tax consumers are parasites on taxpayers. So people can get the message. Feminists were really extreme, and they really managed to change society. So we should also be a bit extreme. We shouldn't be scared about that, because sometimes when you have to make the argument, you make it in the most extreme way, and then something of that. Maybe you don't get the 100% of what you were saying, but you get a bit of at least you're pushing on the right direction. So yes, maybe sometimes extreme arguments don't work if your country is not going from an extreme time. We were going from an extreme time, and people wanted something different. So this is very important. We did everything different. If other party was doing a kind of political ad, we wouldn't do it. If they were doing a kind of activity, like, for example, visiting, I don't know, visiting a senior's house or pensioners, we wouldn't do that. We prefer to make our rock concerts. We prefer to be very noisy. So we wanted to look as different as politicians as possible. So that's very important, to distinguish yourself and to be different and creative and original and to look different. Milei dresses with a jacket like a rock star. He dresses differently. So it was, for example, do you know in Spain there is another? They're not libertarians, but they're more like on the right. They're like Vox. And their discourse is very different from this Irish, but they look the same. They dress too tidy. They they really look the same. So in modern politics, it's not only about the arguments; it's about the visuals. So the visuals are very important in contemporary politics. How you look, how you present yourself. Something that's very important was also libertarians and classic liberals are usually against emotion. Like everything has to be about rational arguments, and emotion is also very important. In my case, the emotion I appealed to was the dignity of a poor person who breaks his chains and fights for his freedom. And that was you could see moments of that were really had a really big emotional impact, of very poor people who are saying, I don't want to be helped out by the state anymore. I want to stand on my own feet. I want to earn what I work for. I don't want to receive a handout from the government. I don't want to be the slave to political organizers. So those moments were really, it brought people to tears in Argentina. Like, whoa, like people are rising up from they want to rebel from their masters, So emotion is also a very big component you should incorporate in your campaigns and your messaging. And also something that's that Milei has demonstrated is that many libertarians try to make the utilitarian argument for liberty, like the economy will be more efficient, we will be much more productive, we will have much better economic results. But most common people, libertarians, we are not common people, but most common people, they prefer the moral argument. This is right, this is wrong, this is lying, this is telling the truth, this is stealing, this is not stealing. So the moral argument, the ethic argument is way stronger to mobilize people, because people in the end most people want to do the right thing. They want to vote what is good and ethic and moral. Many people, at least in Argentina, and maybe this is because of the Latin American Catholic influence, sometimes they say that I prefer to do the right thing even though we might be poorer. So that's why in our culture, like doing the right thing, what is ethic, what's moral, is maybe more important than the utilitarian argument. So we really focus on the moral of the issues. We said socialism is rooted in envy, it's rooted in hatred, it's rooted in like sin, you know, like the bad passions, and it's morally wrong because it's stealing, it's taking away from people who are productive, literally stealing it and giving it to people who don't deserve it. And politicians, they lie, they tell all these good things about the state and how the state is going to take care of your life, but that's morally wrong. It's lying. What's really just is that you take care of your own needs, you work for your own needs and the needs of your family. So we made more of a moral argument. So that's also important in my view, is that if you want to spread the ideas, to try to focus on the more moral side of the argument than the utilitarian or economic efficiency side, even though our ideas are also more efficient, of course. But normal people they don't feel mobilized by that. That's my experience, at least.
It sounds like you guys relied at least somewhat on Rand's argument, because
Yes, of course.
yeah. So I'm gonna move on now to the audience questions.